Hello, everybody, and we are so happy. Well, okay, I'm not seeing you online. I was just about to lie to you, and I called myself out. So I'll just launch right into the announcements because otherwise I'll just keep talking. But I just want to first say thank you, thank you, thank you to those of you that came to Ignite via Zoom last Sunday evening. It was such an encouraging time for us as a staff to see faces that we haven't had the opportunity to see in way too long. And we talked a little bit about when will the church reopen, what will that look like. If you missed Ignite and you didn't get to hear about that, we are going to be communicating that stuff, and we will give you advance notice. We'll do it here in these announcements every week as it makes sense, and we'll also be publishing things online through Facebook or Instagram as well. So if you follow us in those places, you will also be in the know as soon as we know something. We also talked about our finances, and the reality is we are living in a place where we are so thankful for your generosity, and we are weathering this season really well. And there is not this panicky feeling that we're having of how are we going to keep on going. And so thank you for your faithful giving in that. We got to hear encouraging stories about how God is moving in your life, in your homes, in your families, as you are showing up every week online, and you're doing online meetings with your life groups. So it was just an inspiring night. And so we thank you to those of you that took time out to do that. Unfortunately, we didn't record that. So if you missed it, we're hoping we'll be able to gather again for another Ignite in the fall. This past Tuesday this week, we got to go to Cedar Way Elementary School and bring donations that you contributed. And so we had this car full of donations and then this next one as well. And what a blessing it was to serve families in our community. And again, I just want to thank you for stepping in and showing up in people's lives in a really tangible way and letting us be a blessing. And we will do another one in June, and so we are continuing on with that, and we'll give you all the details if you'd like to be involved in that. We're still doing our Give or Get pantry that's happening next door. We are still seeing those shelves change product. Things are coming in, things are going out, and we clear off those shelves when we come in to do the sermon message recordings on Saturday evenings. If they look really sparse, we don't pull anything off of them. If they're really full, we pull a few things, and we set those aside for the food pantry or the Cedar Way pop-up pantry that we do for families as well as Vision House. So you can keep coming to the church, dropping items off, or come and receive something, and we want to be a blessing to you if you need it in this season as well. The last thing that I want to tell you about is Vision House. And, we've talked a long time about this reality that on their Shoreline campus, we're going to have this opportunity to step in and adopt a room. And they reached out and asked, would you be willing to do 2 rooms? And we just said, yes, and we just know what type of community this is and how generous you are. And so we get to put furnishings and bedding and everything in 2 kids' bedrooms. And we just want to tell you, we are hoping to have that registry that we've put online. And I'll tell you how to get that registry in just a minute. But we're hoping to know who's buying what by Friday this week. That is May 29th, Friday. You don't have to have gone out and purchased the items, but just kind of a good faith, hey, we're planning to do this so that we know what we still need and what kind of finances we as a church need to be able to kick into that and know how to budget on behalf of families in need in our community. So the way that you sign up for this is you go to brookviewchurch.com and you fill out your online communication card. So brookviewchurch.com, and then there's a slat that says contact. Click that button, and then you'll see a screen that says online communication card. Fill that out, and right in the front of that, it says Vision House Adopt a Room. If you click that box, we will give you a link to everything that you need to know about this. That does not commit you to buying anything. You can just look at the registries and see what items are there and what could I contribute to this. So you sign up for that registry. The hope is that you would have those items delivered to your home, and then you'll hold those until we're ready and we get the green light to be able to move in. But Giovanna Tibert is coordinating all of that, and so she wants to connect with you as you sign up on that online communication card. So go to that. It is your way to communicate with us about anything that we're talking about, and even questions that we maybe haven't answered. We love to hear from you, and we're looking forward to seeing you online on your communication card.
Well, we are currently in a series on the Sermon on the Mount, and this is one of Jesus' most famous messages that he ever gave. And honestly, in some ways, it's one of the most provocative messages that he's ever given. Jesus, he's been flipping everything. Teachings, commands, ideas, he's been flipping everything on its head and really breaking down the heart and the intent and the true intent behind these teachings that have been in place in this culture for generations. And what we've seen as we've looked into the series is that a lot of these teachings, the intent behind it has been taught to, it's been misused. In some regard, it's been used by the religious leaders to take advantage of the people in some regards. And Jesus, he takes his time and he breaks down these teachings to really show what the true intent was and the true heart behind it. And when I say he takes his time, I don't know if you've noticed, we are now in week 12 of this series, and we still have more to go. But it's been awesome, and I've loved it. So today we're going to look at chapter 5 in verse 33. And Jesus, he says this. He says, "Again, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'Do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made.' But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond that is from the evil one." Well, easy enough, right? You know, if I were to count how many oaths I took this week, we'd be at 0. And so I'm feeling pretty good about this teaching because, finally, something I'm not terrible at. We've looked at some pretty big topics in this series, things that can be confronting and challenging and maybe even at times convicting. Things like judging others, things like the golden rule, treat people how we want to be treated. Don't just do good for the sake of other people's approval. So finally, something I'm not terrible at. And maybe you're feeling the same way, but let me just squash that little bit of hope that you have in your spirit for 1 second. One scholar I read this week, he said that this text, when viewed at face value, is deemed one of the most neglected and insignificant of all Jesus' teachings on the Sermon on the Mount. Yet, he said, for the disciple of Jesus, this can be one of the most catalytic messages for us. And so tonight, what I really hope to accomplish is to get across Jesus' heart behind what he said here. All right, so verse 33, Jesus, he says, "Again, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'Do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made.'" This line, "you have heard it said," reminds us that Jesus is about to talk about something that's really well known. Something that has been engraved in this culture, in this people, in this society. And anytime a rabbi would say, you've heard it said, he's about to quote the Bible or he's about to quote a teaching. And throughout the Sermon on the Mount, every time Jesus has said this, what we see is he's about to bring a truer interpretation to this teaching, to this scripture than what the teachers of the day were giving. And one thing you'll notice about these few verses is that it's really focused on around language and around speech. And that's really important for us to realize and to notice, because this culture, it was a culture of oral tradition. It was all around language. The whole culture evolved, everything was around language. And in this culture, there was no signatures, there was no legal documents, there was no bank accounts. Most business deals, most agreements were done verbally, face to face. And so keeping your word, it had huge implications. We could think of it like this. Someone, they could go behind someone's back on a deal they had. And you could say, hey, this guy gypped me. He went behind my back, he deceived me. But the people, they would say, well, there's no evidence of this, that he's lying. There's no evidence of this deception that took place. Now today we have all sorts of legal stuff, which is about the extent of my knowledge on it, that keep those things in line to verify whether we have or are telling the truth. But in this culture, that was just not the case. So all that to say, the community's welfare as a whole, their flourishing was dependent upon the trustworthiness of what someone said. And for the people listening to Jesus, that would have made a lot of sense. And I think it would have hit a little bit harder than it does for us in our day and age. Now, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus has been focusing primarily on the Ten Commandments and working through that. But here, there isn't an exact text that he's working from. It's more of a combination of multiple verses throughout the Old Testament that would have been really well known. Verses like Leviticus 19:12. It says, you shall not swear falsely by my name and so profane the name of your God. Or verses like Deuteronomy 23 in verses 21 to 23. It says, if you make a vow to the Lord your God, do not be slow to pay it, for the Lord your God will certainly demand it of you, and you will be guilty of sin. But if you refrain from making a vow, you will not be guilty. Whatever your lips utter, you must be sure to do, because you made your vow freely to the Lord your God with your own mouth. Or Ecclesiastes 5:4 says, when you make a promise to God, don't delay in following through, for God takes no pleasure in fools. Keep all the promises you make to him. And so all that to say that what Jesus is talking about here would have been well known. People would have known he was talking about the Old Testament, and oaths were a big part of this culture. And to not fulfill an oath or a vow would have been pretty shameful. It was considered to be unrighteous. An oath was meant to verify someone's credibility of the truth. And so when an oath was made, when an oath was made, if there wasn't follow through, if they didn't do what they said they were going to do, it would cost them, sometimes even their life. And so there's a weightiness to the words that Jesus is speaking here that I think we need to grasp. That keeping your word, having truth to your word really, really matters to Jesus. Now moving on, verse 34, Jesus says, but I tell you, do not swear an oath at all. And that line, but I tell you, remember, that's Jesus saying, this is what you think this means, and I'm gonna break down what this really means, what this actually is telling you, the purpose of it. And he's saying, don't swear an oath at all. And by now you're probably thinking, okay, Casey, we get it. Don't swear oaths, got it? Don't swear oaths. But this is a lot farther. This goes a lot farther than not speaking oaths or breaking vows or going back on your word. What Jesus is talking about here is integrity. That's really what he's getting at. The heart behind this is have integrity. Jesus, he was well aware that people were capable of religious practices. In other words, they were capable of lip service. Jesus knew that oaths were not evidence of a pure heart. It wasn't a safeguard for the truth. An oath was still able to conceal the heart and the motives behind an individual. And that's really what Jesus, I think, is getting at here. Oaths could still be laced with dishonesty, with embellishment, with omission, failing to lead to true integrity, and that's what Jesus is after. So he calls us to live differently all together. He says, don't even make an oath. And I think the picture here is Jesus wants us to be known as people of the truth. So much to the point that if you were to be in a court of law, you wouldn't even have to swear an oath because you are known by the integrity of your word. That's the heart behind this text. I'm not saying to do that. We live in a system where we need to take oaths if we're in the court of law, so don't take this legalistically. That's just the heart behind what Jesus is saying. Just feel I need to say that. Don't want to get any emails. Save Jen some time. Moving on, Jesus continues in verse 34. He says, "But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black." So Jesus, he says, don't swear by God, by the heavens, by the earth, by Jerusalem, by your head. Now, what's he saying here? Now remember, the people of the day, they knew that by swearing an oath, by making a vow, that they were saying, okay, I'm inviting judgment, I'm welcoming accountability in this situation. That's what's happening when I make a vow. Come to find out, not a lot of people like being judged by God. Who would have thought? So they decided to try and pull a fast one on the system and choose things a little less damning, a little less smiteable. And so they started to say things like, I swear by the heavens, I swear by the earth, I swear by the city I live in, or my body. And Jesus is like, so do you think by doing this you're avoiding God's judgment? Because God, he's not bound by the heavens. In fact, it says that's his throne room. And the earth, well, that's his footstool. And Jerusalem, that's his city. In fact, and he's the great king of that city. And your head? Really? That's weird. But God, he made your body, and he governs over it. They were trying to deceive, to backstab, to double-cross, to lie. And Jesus, he comes in, he says, I care deeply about the integrity of your word. It matters so much more than you think it does. And the people are like, dang, like we thought we were being slick. No, you were not. Okay, so what are we supposed to do then? Well, let's look at our final verse here, verse 37. And Jesus says, all you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything else, anything beyond this comes from the evil one. Jesus, he keeps it simple. He says, let your yes be yes, and let your no be no. Well, what is integrity? I think that's important to define. Simply put, it's when your behavior matches your beliefs. It's when your behavior matches your beliefs. It's an integrated lifestyle where what you say lines up with what you believe. With what you say lines up with what you believe. It's when your private life matches your public life. It's often said integrity is what you do when no one's looking. It's different than your reputation. Your reputation is who people think you are. Your integrity is who you really are. It's when your behavior lines up with your beliefs. In fact, I want to look briefly at what the Bible says integrity is. I think if there's any few verses in the Bible that capture what a life of integrity looks like, it would be what David asked God in Psalm 15. He asked God, who can dwell in the sanctuary of the Lord? So Psalm 15, this is what David, he said, Lord, who can dwell in your sanctuary? In other words, who can enjoy your presence continually? Who can fellowship with you and walk with you? And God, he basically says, the person who has integrity. So here's what it says, verse 2. It says, the one whose walk is blameless, who does what is righteous, integrity. Who speaks the truth from their heart, integrity. Whose tongue utters no slander, integrity. Who does no wrong to a neighbor and casts no slurs on them, integrity. Who despises a vile person but honors those who fear the Lord, integrity. who keeps an oath even when it hurts and does not change their mind, integrity, who lends money to the poor without interest and who does not accept a bribe against the innocent, integrity. He says, whoever does these things will not be shaken. You will not be shaken if you live according not to only what you believe, but more importantly, to what God believes and to what God teaches. You will not be shaken. I love that. And I want to look quickly at 4 benefits of what a life of integrity leads to. 4, there's many more, but these are my 4 favorite things of what a life of integrity leads to. Number 1, you can walk closely to God. David said, who can dwell in the sanctuary of the Lord? And God responds, he who has integrity. You can enjoy the ongoing communion and fellowship with God. I like to think of it like this. I don't have kids yet, so I can't use a personal example. But when I do have kids, or if you have kids, if I impart to them my values and we live according to our family values, don't you think that we're going to have an increase in intimacy and fellowship? Versus if I say, okay, this is what Ellersix stand for, and this is what we're gonna live by this, we're gonna own this, and your kids say, you know what, Dad, forget you. We don't want to live by your values. We want to do our own thing. We don't want to live by the family values. So I will still love them, but don't you think that'll block the intimacy and the communion and the fellowship? It's the same thing with God. When we live according to his values, and we can walk with him, we can enjoy his presence daily, moment by moment. And number 2, you will have a built-in guide. You'll have a built-in guide. The Bible says that the integrity of the upright guides them. So you don't have to sit around thinking like, oh, this is kind of gray. I think I can do this. No. It's black, it's white, it's right, it's wrong. You will know what's right and what's wrong, and you'll do the right thing. The integrity will guide you. And number 3, the third thing, this is really important to me personally, and it's you will have a constant peace in your heart. You'll have a constant peace in your heart. When you put your head down on your pillow at night, you won't think, oh, I hope I don't get caught. I hope I don't get found out. You know how it goes. What if my boss finds out? Oh, I'll probably get fired. What if I get exposed for this thing? What if my spouse finds out I've been flirting with that person at work? You don't have that. You just have peace, and it's no fear of getting caught or found out. And the flip side of that, I don't know anybody who lays awake at night going, oh man, I hope no one finds out I did the right thing, right? I hope they don't find out I did the right thing again. Oh man, if they find out, oh man, that I did the right thing. No, there's a constant peace in your heart when you do the right thing. And number 4, you will gain trust, respect, honor, and influence. When you live with integrity, you will gain trust, respect, honor, and influence. If you want to have great kids, be a parent of integrity. If you want to be a great leader in your family, be a man, be a woman of integrity. If you want influence in the business community, be a person of your word. When you have integrity, people will follow you. They will seek your wisdom. They'll seek your advice. They'll honor you, all because you're a person of your word. You're a person of integrity. The challenge is, though, that so many people aren't. In fact, what would you say is the opposite of integrity? I'll help you out. This is what non-Christians usually say about Christians. They'll say, Christians are just a bunch of what? They're a bunch of hypocrites. That's right. Opposite of integrity, it's being a hypocrite. In fact, the Greek word that translates hypocrite, it very literally means actor. And in a Greek play, there'd be a stick and like a face on it with either a mask or, a face, and they'd go around and they'd pull out another one and they'd act with it. And that's what it is. I can't move too far on the stage here, so that's what that was. But that's what it is. It's I'm pretending to be this person. It's not who I really am, which is so common in our world today. And let's just call it what it is. We all have hypocrisy at different times. I sold a vehicle online recently, and I think we've all been there. I was making my post, and it's in great, pristine condition. No blemishes. The interior is immaculate. And put it online. I showed my brother, hey, what do you think of this? And he just gave me this look. Just took my phone back, changed it up a little bit. And then, but why I want to do it more is because I would have made a little bit more money. And so the guy came, bought it. He ended up asking me what I do. And I said, I work at a church in Briar. And it was actually a really valuable lesson for me, because if I would have kept up the original post that was not exactly honest, maybe a little deceitful, and come to find out this guy works at a church, now my opinion is even more cemented that Christians are all hypocrites. And they're just like everyone else, and they're not honest. And so it was actually really valuable for me to kind of experience that. But this happens all the time. At some time or another, we will all have moments where we lack integrity. And it's often really hard to see in ourselves. I think sometimes we try and justify our own behavior, but God, He hates it. He hates it. In fact, when we look at Jesus, He was far harder on hypocrites than He was prostitutes, adulterers, tax collectors, all types of other vile sins. He was hardest on hypocrites. I'll give you an example. In Matthew 23, verse 25, Jesus, He looks at the hypocrites and He says, woe to you. Now, whenever Jesus says, woe to you, He's basically saying, you are in so much trouble. You do not know how bad this is going to be for you. He's essentially pronouncing judgment on them. He says, woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites, you play actors, you who lack integrity. He said, you clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. In other words, you put on a good game face. You look religious, you look righteous, but on the outside, outside is clean, but the inside is filthy. He goes on to say, you blind Pharisees. In other words, you're so blind you can't even see it. You don't even see your own hypocrisy. First clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside will also be clean. Integrity doesn't start from the outside in, it starts from the inside out. So in the same way, on the outside, you appear to people as righteous. You've got your mask on, but on the inside, you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. Woe to you, you who lack integrity, you who are full of hypocrisy. But it's so easy to do it. It's so easy to put your little mask on and to play the game. On the inside, on the outside, we look clean, but on the inside, we're dirty before God. So let me ask you this question. I want you to really think about it. I want you don't just think like, oh, yeah, this is what I want to think. No, really think about what this looks like. Is this true? What do my actions say is true? Here's the question. What is your integrity worth? What is it worth to you? And not just like, oh yeah, like a lot. Oh, it's worth everything. No. What do your actions say that your integrity is worth? For example, my whole story with the car, where I fabricated the description, I don't want to talk about it anymore. That would have maybe increased the sale of the car by maybe $200-$300 at best. In that moment, I just traded my integrity for that perceived benefit. Maybe you're a student and you really want to get the good grades. And so you cheat on an exam or you cheat on a paper just to get by. Well, that's what your integrity is worth. Maybe you embezzle something at work, maybe something small, maybe just like a ream of paper to use at your home computer. And I know it's a ream because of The Office, and I want to shout out The Office because I know it's a ream of paper. But that's what your integrity is worth in that moment. Such a little thing that we just kind of write off, but that's what it's worth to you. Maybe you're married and finances are tight, and so you buy an outfit and you hide it away for a while. This may or may not be a true story. You hide it for a few months, and then you pull it out, you put it on, and when your husband asks, "Hey, is that new? This whole thing? I've had this for months." No. Some of you are thinking, that's genius. No, it's not. That's what your integrity is worth to you. And the list can go on and on and on, but what is your integrity worth? Not just what do you say it is, not just what do you believe, but what is your life actually say it's worth? Now, there's a guy in the Old Testament, a really interesting story, a guy by the name of Job. And if you were to ask Job, what is your integrity worth? He would have said and lived, it is worth more than my life. My integrity is worth more than my life to me. So let me just tell you his story if you don't know it. Lucifer, or Satan, was criticizing God's people and saying that they don't really love you. That they're just, you're faithful to them, so they're good to you, and all that. And so God's like, no, there actually are some who love me. And he said, prove it. Show me one. Show me one person. He said, well, there's actually this guy named Job. He's full of integrity. He really loves me. So Satan says, okay, give me a shot at him. And kind of interesting, God says, okay, have at it. Have at him. I think you'll see he actually really does love me. And so Satan, he goes and he strips Job of everything. And his wife, interestingly enough, turns on him. His friends turn on him. And his wife, she says, why are you hanging on to your integrity? Why don't you just curse God and die, you big old loser? That's what she says. And his friends, they say, you know you've done something wrong. This wouldn't be happening. All these bad things wouldn't be happening to you if you hadn't done something wrong. Quit claiming that you're a person of integrity. And here's what he says to them in chapter 27, verses 5 and 6. He says, I will not deny my integrity. I will maintain my righteousness and never let go of it. My conscience will not reproach me as long as I live. He said, my integrity is worth everything to me. You can take everything else, but you cannot take away my right to choose to honor God in every aspect and detail of my life. It's worth everything to me. Now, I think where some people get hung up on this idea, and it's where we oftentimes get hung up, is when we look at this as just another rule. When we think, like, okay, God's just nitpicking now. He's just, okay, don't even, don't take an oath and all that stuff. But with Jesus, there's always more to the story. And I think why Jesus is calling us to be people of truth and to live our whole lives this way is because he knows better than we do that when we do this, that's what builds trust. That's where intimacy is cultivated. And so many of us lack trust and intimacy, not only with God, but with those in our lives who are dear to us. Jesus is the master shepherd. And he's telling us, I know better than you do. I know better than you do. You think this is just a set of rules. You think that this is just, I'm putting limits on you, I'm putting parameters on you, but that's not the case. I love you so much, and that's why I'm doing this. Living with integrity means that we are to live intentionally. As we try to become more like Jesus, as we try to influence the world around us, as we try to bring little pieces of heaven to earth and give it to people, as we try and do that, we must be people who are reliable. We must be people who are trustworthy, who are faithful, who are consistent, who are full of integrity. People whose yeses mean yes and whose no's actually mean no. That means something, because how we live matters. I love what St. Francis of Assisi said. He said, preach the gospel at all times. When necessary, use words. And I love that. And I love that because it's a lifestyle. How you live is a testament to the gospel, and you're preaching all the time. You're preaching all the time, not just when people are watching or when you know you need to do the right thing. No, you're preaching your life. You're preaching the gospel all day long in all the choices you make and the little things. What we say, what we do, when we show up, how we speak, when we follow through, what we give when we say we're going to give, all of that is connected to being people of our word, being people of integrity, and to being people of Jesus. And as I close, I want to tell you a story that I remember hearing from one of my pastors and teachers when I was in college. So he said one night he went to the convenience store to get a few things, and he went and paid the cashier, and she mistakenly gave him back way too much change. And he didn't realize it at first, so he went back to his car, is getting sorted, putting his things and sorting his money out, and he realizes, I have a lot more money than I should have. And his first thought was, wow, thanks, Jesus. Thanks, God. This must be God blessing me, right? Been there. But it didn't take long for him to go, no, I need to go back in and give it to her. So he goes back in and he says, hey, you gave me more change than I was due. And immediately her eyes started to well up. And she said, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Apparently this wasn't the first time she had done this. And apparently her boss had said, the next time this happens, you're going to be fired. And she couldn't afford to lose her job. She was a single mom. And she was just extremely thankful that he came back in. And I'm sure it probably happened again since that was even the case. But at least in this moment, she kept her job. And I think it's cool because in that moment, he was able to see, my choice to be honest and decent and to have integrity had a really cool result. So sometime later, the same guy, he was preaching a message, and after the message, he was out and he was talking to people, and this guy came up to him, and you could tell he had just had a moment with God, a significant moment. He was just like, oh, you know how it goes. You were talking right to me, and oh man, I can just feel something's different in my life. And here's where the story gets really cool. He said, hey, a few weeks back, I was in line behind you when the lady gave you too much change. And you came back in and gave it back, and I was blown away. I couldn't believe it. He said, the way I see it, if you did that, if being honest and telling the truth and living with integrity mattered in that little insignificant moment, then you must be a trustworthy person. And I believed every word you said about Jesus. And that's why I chose to give my life to him tonight. And I will never forget that story. I will never forget that story. I truly believe how we live and how we act and how we treat people says a lot more than what we say. And our words, and like I said earlier, it can just be lip service. But if you live it out, if you actually go through the motions, that's, I think, what really, really is impactful. In a world that is more shocked by integrity than we are by a lack of integrity, may we choose to live our whole lives as a testament of the gospel. Let us live an integrated life when what we believe actually lines up with what we do. And not just what we believe, but more importantly, what God believes. And when we do that, you'll walk with God, you'll have a built-in guide, you will have peace all the time, and you will gain honor, trust, respect, and influence. So we just need to take the mask off and just be our true selves and live with integrity and live upright. That's, I think, what makes the difference. We can go through the motions and we can say the right things, but if we're not actually letting these things sink in and let Jesus mold us, then I don't know. I love that story because it's so cool. Who would have thought that the guy standing in line behind you, not everyone's a pastor and speaking sermons and whatnot, but if he would have, I guess there would have been no way of knowing if he lied, but imagine if he's sitting, or the guy I sold the car to. Let's say he comes to service and he's like, oh, that's the guy who put the fake ad up. That's not going to change his life. He's just out the back door. Oh, yeah, that's the hypocrite who tried to sell me the bad car. But those little moments, making those little choices, you don't know who's watching. You don't know what impact it'll have. We don't know. And so I think we just have to live knowing that it's those little things that can make the biggest difference. Father, I just thank you for this teaching, for this word. I just pray that you would continue to work on my heart and on our heart to just be people of integrity, to be people of our word, to where we say things, Lord, that we mean it, and that people can trust us, and that we will follow through. We will be people of follow through everywhere we go, that people can see us and they know I can trust that person. Not because he's just a good person, but because of who he follows, because of who he aligns with, and that's you, Jesus. I pray that you would just help us to be mindful of this in our day-to-day lives as we go to work, as we talk to people, as we're with our family, Lord, that we would just, through all of this whole series, that we would just take everything, Lord, and really, really, really make it a part of who we are. Lord, we love you so much, and we thank you for who you are. In your name we pray. Amen.